Hey, looks like folks are coming in, so I'd like to welcome you all to our Stewardship.21 Forum. We are thrilled to have you join us today, and for the next 5 weeks, albeit we're sad that you won't be able to stargaze together by firelight within one of California's amazing landscapes after a day of convening. We're going to be doing this virtually. My name is Sharon Farrell, and I lead the Project Stewardship and Science programs for the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, the cooperating association for the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. As part of my work, I direct a cross-boundary stewardship partnership in Marin County, Wantagh, and I have the privilege of facilitating the California Landscape Stewardship Network. The work of the network is guided by a phenomenal team of individuals pictured on this slide. Many of them have been a part of the steering committee since the network's inception. In addition to the steering committee, this Stewardship 2021 Forum has benefited from the creativity, the passion, the commitment from the following list of individuals too. They and participants of our 4 Roundtable Forum working groups have helped shape today's vision, program, and experience. You will hear more from many of them over the next 5 weeks. So let's take a look at today's agenda. We're going to start off being welcomed by Senator McGuire. Then we'll have some reflections that I'll offer on our journey that we've taken over the last 5 years and where our future lies. We'll then be joined by Deputy Assistant Secretary Shannon Espinoz, and then reflect on the network's 5-year strategy, where we're headed, what we plan for in the next 5 weeks together, and then we'll close our time together with some reflections on our next forum around collaborative leadership and a working lunch that will focus on equity and inclusivity. So before we begin today, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping notes. Always fun, right? So we ask that you please mute your microphones while others are speaking so we have the best chance of hearing each other clearly. For the best viewing experience throughout the forum, please follow any instructions that our facilitators provide regarding how to set your view in Zoom. For example, for today, we'll be spotlighting speakers, and you can set your view to speaker view. To change your view, you can just go to the top right corner of your Zoom screen and select view. We'll also be recording these sessions. So if you don't wish to be recorded, you can turn off your video. And so that we know who's here together, we ask that you put your full name and affiliation in the screen box. And so to change your name, you can click on the 3 dots in the top right corner and select your name and your organization. Also, please feel free to put any questions for our speakers throughout the forum in the chat box. While we'll not have a formal Q&A after each speaker, we will be monitoring the chat and collecting questions for speakers if they have time. So let's begin our journey today together. Kicking off our program, we'll be joined by California Senator Mike McGuire. We're honored to have Senator McGuire from Senate District 2 welcome us today. His work in Northern California aligns in many ways with the goals and principles of landscape scale stewardship and underscores the interrelationship between stewarding California's natural resources, celebrating outstanding landscapes, while supporting the region's local economies and working lands and forests. He will open today by sharing insights about how we can collectively catalyze opportunities to increase the impact, relevance, and reach of environmental stewardship through collaborative conservation. I'd like to welcome Senator McGuire.
Hey, well, good morning, Sharon. How you doing this morning?
Doing well, and yourself?
Hey, living the dream on a Wednesday. I am so excited to be with you. Can we give it up, everybody, loud and proud, from our living rooms and our office for Sharon and to the incredible work of this amazing organization, bringing so many of you together to be able to focus on what is so critical at this time, our natural resources and watersheds, our coastlines. Thank you for your incredible work, first and foremost, Sharon, and to the entire board and to the organization. Look, bottom line is this, especially in these challenging times, your mission is more important than ever. And I see it every day working on California's North Coast. In the Senate, I'm honored to be able to represent 40% of California's coastline, from the gorgeous San Francisco Bay all the way up to the rugged coastline of the Oregon border. And as the climate crisis becomes even more acute here in the Golden State, We must continue to work together. And I think we are all on the same page. We must continue to work together to invest in California's natural resources, our landscapes, watersheds, and coasts, and in our forests and state and national parks, our regional parks, and ensuring that our public lands are more fire resilient. And California is facing unprecedented environmental headwinds at the moment. A significant drought is staring us down. And while we're coming off a devastating 5-year fire season, last year was the worst on record. 4 of the 5 largest fires in our state's history all took place in 2020. The climate crisis is real, and our temperatures are up between 1.5 to 2 degrees across California over the last 70 years. And over the last 50 years, we've seen a 30% decline in the Western state snowpack. That's why we must work closer together. That's why your work is more important than ever, to be able to protect what makes the Golden State one of the most biologically diverse states in the entire nation. So I want to talk about what we're doing to be able to help support your work and how we can continue to partner here in the months and years to come. Number 1, you're going to see record fire resiliency funding invested by the state moving to you, $536 million for fire prevention, response, and resilience. Those dollars are moving even as we speak and should be spent by the 1st of August. $380 million of that $536 million is just for forest health, removing dead and dying trees, vegetation management, strategic thinning on public lands, fire reduction on both fish and wildlife, as well as in state parks. And we're going to pass another fire resiliency budget in July. That will be another shot in the arm, $500 million. So we'll have over $1 billion invested in fire resiliency on public lands here in the Golden State in 2021. And for the first time, and something that we've fought so hard for, is that our conservancies are finally going to get funding to be able to issue grants to local communities as well as local regional park systems to help make them more fire resilient. I think we need to give it up to our conservancy network for the incredible job that they do each and every day on behalf of tens of thousands of Californians and millions of acres of coastline, as well as rangelands and mountains. In addition, we have to pass a climate and wildfire resiliency bond. That is going to be up on the ballot here in 2021, $5.5 billion to be able to focus dollars for sea level rise, prepare public lands for what we know is this growing crisis, and to be able to continue to invest through the next decade in more fire resiliency measures, both on public as well as private lands. We also need to become much more focused on ecotourism and rural job creation. We know that when we invest in the outdoor recreational economy, some of the most economically challenged communities in our state prosper. That's why we're bringing forward the Great Redwood Trail. The Great Redwood Trail will become the longest rail trail in the United States of America. You're going to be able to hop on in San Francisco Bay, walk up a defunct now rail line all the way up to Humboldt Bay, 320 miles. In California's outdoor recreational economy, it's worth $98 billion. We anticipate that outdoor recreational economy coming out of COVID is going to grow by 1/3 as folks have rediscovered our public lands and natural resources. We need to start investing in these projects like the Great Redwood Trail that is not only good for the environment, but good for the economy in some of the poorest communities in rural America that exist right here in California. And speaking of the pandemic and public lands, when our public lands were opened up, millions have flocked to our state parks, our national parks, and beaches and seashores. State parks needs a long-term sustainable funding source. We should not go budget cycle by budget cycle funding state parks. We need to be able to go back to the voters to look at a sustainable funding source for our state parks long-term here in the state of California. I'll lastly talk about two different legislative actions that we're looking at this year. Number one is passing of SB 716. What that does is supports your work. It makes it easier for all of you to be able to do habitat restoration by cutting the bureaucratic red tape to restore habitat and watersheds in every corner of this state, to be able to support the work that so many of you are doing on a daily basis. And finally, we got to get a drought resiliency package passed this year. We're looking at between $2 to $4 billion that will be moved into drought by July 1st of this year. We hope to be able to secure nearly $1 billion of that drought package for endangered species protection and helping communities as well as conservancies, along with state parks and fish and wildlife, to be able to focus on endangered species protection along impaired waterways. Look, my bottom line is this. We have big challenges in front of us, but I also look at them as opportunities to be able to expand on the work that you're going to be moving on today, to be able to invest in your mission, invest in what makes this state so great. Our natural resources, our rivers, our coasts, the Sierra and the Western Range, and to invest in people. And I just want to say thank you, Sharon. I am so grateful to be with you. And I just can't say this enough. It is so impressive to see the work that you're doing each and every day, and all the folks that you brought together today to be able to move California forward out of this COVID-induced recession, out of this pandemic, and continuing our trajectory as the best state in America. And thank you so much for allowing me to join you.
Thank you, Senator McGuire. Let's give everyone give Senator McGuire a round of applause. In my word, if you bring that passion, inspiration, energy to addressing our climate challenges, I think we're on the right track. So I really appreciate your support.
No, thank you, Sharon. It's good to be with you, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay, I don't know about you, but that was your morning coffee. There's a lot of energy that just came with that talk. Knowing how busy it is in Sacramento, I really appreciated Senator McGuire's joining us today to welcome us and to bring that inspiration. I wanted to start today with a few reflections on the network's journey, its inspiration, and what I think of as its promise. Later in today's program, I will outline more about the Stewardship.21 Forum, how it came to be, the roundtables that were integral into creating the content, and what to expect in our next 5 weeks together. So let's start with some reflections, going all the way back to June 2016, when I was joined on a late summer afternoon in San Francisco by 16 landscape stewardship practitioners from around the state. Some were old friends, others new faces. Together, we reflected on the opportunities and barriers we experienced working in cross-boundary stewardship partnerships. As we shared our stories, similar themes emerged. Our environmental work must happen at a scale necessary to exceed the challenges before us. It must be broad, it must include broader voices, and it must honor and integrate different lands, working lands, public, private, tribal, and others. Similarly, to be successful, we must create solutions for challenges that limit the scale of our work. We need to build capacity and resources to cultivate emergent thinking, collective action, and impact. And at the same time, we all acknowledge that facilitating and sustaining cross-boundary stewardship partnerships is still a young practice. And the necessary policies, funding mechanisms, investments, and day-to-day operational needs are still evolving and are not necessarily fully understood. As the meeting concluded, there was broad agreement that we could learn and grow from working together. And there was a value in growing connectivity in our shared work across the state. We agreed that there was a seed ready to be fertilized. And as a collective, we could shine a much brighter light on our shared challenges and solutions. That fall, the California Landscape Stewardship Network was born through the energy of 6 regional networks: WANTAM, the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network, the Peninsula Working Group, the Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program, Redwoods Rising, and the Orange Coast Partnership. Today, the network involves approximately 30 cross-boundary partnerships focused on landscape scale work across 40% of the state. We share and advance our work through facilitating peer exchange, convenings, white papers, and working with state, regional, and local leaders. We believe that the benefits of undertaking stewardship at scale are significant, if not essential, and that working at scale requires embracing complexity. The complexity of having different landowners, different policies, different cultures, and more. coupled with often limited resources, coordination, and capacity to support and achieve collective goals. We embrace this. Our mission is centered around how to shift paradigms, systems, practices, and culture to reduce these obstacles and complications and forge new solutions. In developing the Spring Stewardship Forum, I reflected on the past 4 years of our ever-growing in-person convenings around the state. Each has strengthened our own connectivity, expanded our voices, broadened our perspectives, and ignited action. Additionally, the recent onset of virtual convenings has enabled the network to reduce barriers and expand our reach with new networks. Regardless of the convening medium, we bear witness to the transformational energy that flows from gathering people together to listen, to learn, and to dream, and the rich relationships that grow from those connections. As our connectivity grows and deepens, we also see that our strength is based in the diversity of our differences, whether geographic, cultural, lived experiences, organizations, partnership size, and others. It is reflected in the network's values that continue to guide us through the complexity of our work. Humility, empathy, and reverence set the tone for how we approach our work. Inclusion, trust, and reciprocity are the essential ingredients we strive to embody as we undertake it. Similarly, it is reflected in the outcomes of the network's white papers, including capacity building for collaboration, stewarding California's biodiversity, shifting the regulatory paradigm towards bold, immediate action for a resilient California landscape, and others. These papers have helped advance our work, broaden continued thinking, inspire new approaches, and even catalyze initiatives with state leaders such as Cutting Green Tape. And most recently, with the development of the network's 5-year strategic roadmap, we have harnessed the learnings of our past 5 years to expand our commitment to supporting youth, our place-based networks, and affiliates. We hope to do this through 4 key focal areas, which Darcy will describe later today: strengthening our peer exchange and capacity building work, increasing our work to create system solutions to complex challenges, fostering support and participation in larger landscape stewardship movements, and remaining nimble and adaptable to new opportunities as we grow our network's infrastructure. I don't know about you, but so much has happened in the past 5 years. Global pandemics, right? Anti-racism uprisings, changed administrations, and the largest, most intense wildfires in California's history. The fact that we are meeting virtually instead of gathering in person just punctuates this. Our work is already challenging, and with all this change, it certainly does not feel like it's getting any easier. But that's where our networks come in, to meet these ecological and social challenges in a more integrated way. And while the past 5 years have been our living history, the next 5 years will be our opportunity to truly define our future, define the promise of 21st century conservation, and how we reach our potential as a part of a larger national and international movement around this work. In a recent opinion piece, 21st Century Conservation, a Vision for Collaboration Across Landscape, several former Department of Interior leaders reflected that we are at an important juncture in the arc of conservation. We have inspiring conservation successes, but there is much more to do to sustain biodiversity, create a more just and inclusive conservation movement, address the challenges of climate change, conserve parks and working open spaces, and sustain our vibrant rural and urban communities. Their sentiments and others are acknowledging that our growing movement intersects with other social change movements related to social justice, public health, urban regeneration, and many others, all essential components to truly fostering stewardship at scale. Change is happening fast, requiring us to reflect, adapt, and act more quickly than before. For the network, much of our work is centered around facilitating change, culture change, systems change, organizational change, environmental change, and more. Today, we have administrations at both the federal and state level that are receptive and, in many cases, inspired to advance landscape scale conservation and stewardship work as essential to reducing biodiversity loss and impacts from climate change. As shared by Senator McGuire, there's a climate bond potentially in front of us that we can support and make true change around. And as we will hear from Deputy Assistant Secretary Shannon Estenos, these administrations are showing support for bold, innovative action in our field, Our opportunity is to help inform and shape this work. We're also seeing important enabling conditions, a strong commitment to science, an opening to craft new policies, increased opportunities to bring climate adaptation and mitigation work, growing awareness that regional networks can play an integrator role to meet state and local goals, and racial reckoning that is opening up doors and minds to conversations around equity, inclusivity, and diversity in our thinking around landscape stewardship. Coupling this new hope with the urgent need for action, it is clear we have an inflection point in front of us. We are living history, and more importantly, we can shape history. The receptivity of these administrations and the broadening of voices in this work brings forward potential support, resources, and a focus to translate challenges into solutions at multiple scales. I imagine that each of us in this room feel the urgency and imperative to act. As former National Park Service Director John Jarvis recently said, it's no longer, are we going to do something? It's, are we going to do enough? While recognizing this inflection point, the spirit of the Stewardship Forum is to celebrate our shared history, to chart the opportunities before us, to reflect and learn from each other, to galvanize nascent ideas, to forge new connections and friendships, have fun, and commit to shared priorities. Our time together during the next 5 weeks will inform our work ahead and contribute to the development of a larger fall Stewardship Forum, which will be held in the first week of November. I am always reminded that landscape scale stewardship is still a young and emerging field. Many now recognize its potential, but it takes gatherings like this to access the wisdom to see how we can continue shifting the conservation paradigm toward cross-boundary collaborative approaches that connect efforts and scale them. Coupling this with the network's continued goals to shift assumed paradigms in conservation and stewardship, I asked myself, how might the network recognize and honor our Indigenous partners, friends, and colleagues who are attending this forum? We are all seeing the practice of land acknowledgement happen in our meetings, convenings, and events, and we know this practice can be a powerful one to recognize history, community, and true partnership with Indigenous people. So as the network's relationships with California's tribes grows, and our connections to the tribes whose ancestral territories we work strengthens, we want to take a moment to recognize the centrality of Indigenous perspectives and cultures in all considerations related to lands and land stewardship. We have much to learn. The Network Steering Committee is committed to authentic and meaningful action to build solidarity in our conservation and stewardship movement. And so we invite all of you to reflect on 3 questions that will hopefully help us learn together about how we can stand in true allyship with California's tribes. First, what is the history of the land you directly or indirectly work on or have access to? Second, who are the native people or communities where you live, or who are connected to the land you are working on? Third, what is one step you can take today to support Native and all people who wish to support Indigenous priorities and practices in stewardship? As we consider these questions throughout the next 5 weeks together, offered in acknowledgement of our Indigenous communities and the real-time learnings of our growing network, I feel it important also to acknowledge that our network has struggled with its work at the intersection of immigration reform, Black Lives Matter, and other social movements. We must reckon with historical systems that continue to harm, from racism to economic hardship and other forms of inequality. Understanding this, we see an opportunity in asking, what is the role of collaborative landscape scale stewardship and networks in supporting outcomes that are just, equitable, and durable for the diversity of Californians? How can we use this inflection point to reconsider and center the intersection of conservation and stewardship with the imperative of racial justice, inclusivity, and intersectional environmentalism? Knowing there is so much that can be explored in this area, we have commissioned a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Roundtable in 2020 to help us authentically address these questions and more. With that, I'd like to invite one of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Roundtable's co-chairs, Shalana De Silva, who has been with the network for the past 4 years and has championed the need for the network to explore and embrace this role in equity work. Shalana is a writer, organizer, and policy expert who is dedicated to creating a just and resilient society. We are extremely grateful for the gift of her leadership.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And thank you, Senator McGuire, for your leadership and commitment as well. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today. As Sharon noted, it is my honor to serve as co-lead for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Roundtable alongside my friend and colleague, Jose Gonzalez. Our DEI Roundtable is a group of women and men from a variety of racial backgrounds, organizational and movement roles, and geographic locations. They're all active thought leaders in the work to build a more justice-focused conservation movement. Today, it's my privilege to invite all of you on behalf of our roundtable to center the principles of real inclusivity and justice in our ongoing conversations throughout the Spring Forum. You received the individual inquiry guide in your Spring Forum packet, and this is just one tool that you can use to take us up on this invitation to center justice and inclusivity as you participate in these convenings. As Sharon noted, we all have much to learn when it comes to building a truly just conservation and stewardship movement. I hope that the network's vulnerability and honesty in framing an Indigenous land acknowledgement in the form of questions around solidarity can serve as a model for all of us. We can and must move beyond performative gestures, be real about where we are in our capacities and commitments to solidarity and anti-oppression, and keep moving towards each other and growing. So how do we keep moving towards each other and growing? The leaders of our roundtable established early goals for this Spring Forum to bring history, place, and community into this work as an invitation to build this new justice-focused stewardship movement we're talking about. Given their identities and roles, they have much to offer in designing a pathway for all of us to meaningfully do that, bring history, place, and community into this work. You'll learn about all of this as the Spring Forum unfolds. You're at this table with me today, so we already have what we need to start down this pathway together. We cannot wait any longer for the perfect individual or organizational conditions, the right training, the right book, the willing Black, Indigenous, or person of color partner. We must start today to transform the work of land protection and stewardship into the very tools that will help dismantle systems of oppression and build the resilient future we all want. Here's the truth. Conservation's roots are entangled in settler colonialism. As we know from US history, often one powerful, wealthy, white individual made decisions about which lands to protect or restore, and these were stolen lands. We must learn about this history, acknowledge it, and choose a new path forward. Today, we are a growing movement of professionals, activists, writers and thinkers, artists, restoration practitioners, and government officials capable of recognizing that the glory of our public lands is rooted in a shameful, oppressive, and violent past. We must recognize this so that we can harness our power to collectively redefine what comes next for public lands and stewardship in general. My ancestors did not have the privilege I have to analyze the problems, research and discuss solutions, or perhaps even consider the effect colonialism had on their health and the health of their lands. That we can see these problems today and consider solutions together is a gift. Our gaze is capable of casting back 400 years and forward into the future of possibilities. What will we do with this gift? Just as environmental justice and climate justice work seeks to shift power away from environmental polluters and exploitative, extractive industries, so must we seek to shift power. How can we shift power to local and Indigenous land stewards? And what individual power are we willing to give up in our daily lives to do that? The author Adrienne Marie Brown teaches about emergent strategy. She shares that meaningful change emerges through hallway conversations, moments of vulnerability with your colleagues, tentative but intentional steps in a new direction. Can you commit to noticing and even fostering emergent strategies? Can you commit, just as a start, to making small-scale changes, valuing critical connections and not just big moves or end goals? Can you recognize and value a real-time process that propagates outward, like mycelium threads underground, growing stronger through multiplicity and connection? And are you willing to do this even when it's not visible for recognition and kudos? In other words, can you appreciate the mycelium threads working hard in the cover of darkness and not just the fruiting body of the mushroom in the sunlight? I can talk about our moral imperatives to do better, and I believe in them, but I wonder if we might also consider how incredible it would feel to look back on our lives, our shared work, and see this moment in time as the point at which we all broke free from our limitations and chose to intentionally build a more just society with every thought, word, and action. Imagine the joy in that. What would happen if we decided to collectively write a new justice-focused chapter for land conservation and stewardship, and we let it be messy and imperfect, but relentless? If not us, who? If not now, when? There's no one else who can shape-shift the work of conservation and stewardship so that it is more inclusive and thereby effective. We are all at this table together, so let's get to work. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Shalana. It's always a gift to work with you. And I'm truly grateful for the work of the DEI Roundtable and all of its leaders. I really appreciate that. So let's shift our focus a little to what's ahead. For the next 10 minutes, one of our steering committee members and co-lead of the network's policy and funding working group, Darcy Gooden-Collins, will share more about the specific work of the network and our strategic roadmap. Darcy is the CEO of the League to Save Lake Tahoe and a key partner of the Regional Lake Tahoe Basin Environmental Improvement Program. At the League, Darcy works to keep Tahoe blue by serving as an ambassador and an advocate for the lake with state and federal leaders, and a scientist to ensure the League's advocacy is grounded in the best available science. For those of you who've attended past convenings, you might also know Darcy is a phenomenal dancer and party planner extraordinaire for the network. I'd like to welcome Darcy.
Thank you, Sharon. So good to see everyone. I'll repeat what everyone said. I'm sad we're not together in person, but I guess this is the next best thing. If any of you have attended, I know a lot of you have a network convening before, or if this is your first, I'm sure you will end up agreeing with me that the network has become very quickly a productive and energizing place to share resources and to solve common problems on large-scale landscape stewardship. And in just 6 short years, we've brought together thousands of those that are working hard to create a sustainable California through collaboration and acting beyond our individual boundaries. We've done this through peer exchange and connecting practitioners, building capacity for landscape stewardship by supporting cross-boundary work and sharing knowledge and skills, and solving shared problems like addressing barriers to working at scale and developing strong relationships with state leaders. Sharon touched on a few of these things in her introduction today, but I think it's worth reiterating some of our big successes. And building on these successes that we've had over the past few years, we've just recently concluded a productive process of assessing opportunities and needs in order to build a roadmap for our next 3 years. Successes include things like peer exchanges, such as the one we did where we looked at visitor capacity and use challenges in several different locales. One of them was at Tahoe, one of them was down in Marin County. We produced a case study on capacity building for collaboration, and of course, the cutting the green tape roundtables and recommendations. This planning process was conducted by the steering committee with guidance from Gary Knobloch, and it was great conversations. And we also had a lot of support from Michelle O'Haron, who has helped us articulate and put this roadmap on our website. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And we relied on feedback from several sources to guide our mapping, including targeted interviews with partners and advisors. We had a network-wide participant survey, many of you probably filled that out, and in-depth discussions among the committee on key issues. Some of the emerging themes that floated to the top of these conversations include the network, describe the network as serving as a platform rather than a formal organization, and that the core purpose is to connect people and offer a space for dialogue, much like we are doing today. We work on current needs and are therefore adaptive and responsive. The network's success is also based on convening the right diversity of people and facilitation, and importantly, our follow-through. And it was noted that there is a need to continue to connect more diverse people and sectors, and that there is also a need to continue to build capacity among practitioners, such as leadership skills and other skills. So the values and objectives that are laid out in our roadmap are categorized into 4 strategic focal areas. I'll just quickly walk you through these, but there's plenty of opportunity to dive deeper into them should you want to. One of the focal areas is peer exchange and capacity building, and we plan to do this by reinstituting in-person convenings and peer exchanges when it's safe to do so, engage with more people and unlock more ideas. So this includes people and communities representing diverse stewardship voices and a broader range of racially, culturally, ethnically diverse participants. And we will also roll out a collaborative leadership training. Another focal area is system solutions, and we plan to implement the recommendations from Cutting Green Tape, identify additional system solutions like data sharing, and engage in priority policy areas. And then third, we want to foster and support participation in larger landscape stewardship by actively supporting the paradigm shift toward large landscape stewardship within the conservation field, continue to invite conversations to support movement building, especially beyond our community of practice, and implement Stewardship 2021 roundtable forums. And then finally, but not of least importance, is to continue in order to continue to do the important work that we have been doing, we need to create a sustainable network. So we plan to do that by enhancing network capacity and maintaining flexibility, and also explore a regional hub model. And you'll notice throughout this forum that the forum aligns with these 4 priorities, and you'll see all of them as a theme throughout these next couple of weeks. And if you want to dive deeper into this work and the roadmap, we've got an executive summary on our website, and we have the more in-depth full roadmap that you can really dive into. But I think the key thing to note is this is a living document. So we want to receive feedback. We want to continue to be nimble. If another priority seems to bubble through the surface that is timely, we can adapt and be nimble to adding that. So if you want to provide feedback, please read through it. Feel free to give any feedback if we're on the right track, if there's something that's missing. Devin Landry will be taking those comments, and he can put you probably have his email. There's probably scattered emails in your inbox from him, but that is the best place to send comments to. And then lastly, I'd love to thank our entire steering committee for this process, and then the guidance from the leadership there. And we are looking to expand that committee. You were briefly introduced to all of the members by Sharon on that slide earlier in today's presentation, and we'd like to expand and have a few more voices on that committee. So if you're interested in joining at a different leadership level, please contact us, and we're happy to walk you through the stages of doing that. But I'm excited and thrilled for the opportunities for growth over the next 3 years. And I think we've identified some very important ones, and these were consistent with the feedback that we received. I'll turn it back to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Darcy, so much. There's a lot of excitement ahead, and I really appreciate the invitation for others to join us. And as you said, it's a living document. And so as people read this work and they'll have new ideas, please let us know. We had a conversation on our very first meeting where we said, if we don't continue to add value to the work of the landscape scale stewardship movement, then we have ended the time that we need to share together. And so our goal is to continue to add that value. So much appreciated. And we'll be seeing you later. And I'm really sorry we don't get to dance together. And Devin, don't get that as an idea to put us on screen together with music. That was not an invitation.
Oh, that might happen in one of these. I think it's a good idea.
Week 2, we'll go week 2. Okay, so thank you for your patience, everybody. We think we might be able to finish a little early. And so we just want to go through now, like what's ahead. We've got 4 more weeks together to kind of go a little bit deeper into the program and some of the design of the program. So I'll start with, we had an idea. Since our inception, the network has sought to connect coordinators and participants in home networks through in-person convenings and regional collaborative conversations. We have historically hosted about 2 of these a year and then tried to have additional regional conversations pending the topics. During our first year, the steering committee discussed we should have maybe a larger conference in our 4th or 5th year to share our learnings, expand participation, broaden perspectives, celebrate our work, and increase the commitment to this work. That was if we still felt, as I just said to Darcy, that the work was bringing value to our field. Well, I think you all know this next part of the chapter, right? COVID happened, we hit a small road bump, and we adapted. The conference was scheduled, the in-person conference was scheduled to happen in Marin County last week. So in the spirit and culture of the network, we adapted and we created 2 virtual Stewardship 2021 forums, a spring one and a fall one. This event, the Spring Stewardship Forum, is specifically designed for a small number of network participants, state and regional leaders, and affiliates in our shared work. It builds from the roundtables that I will describe momentarily and that you've heard of from several of our speakers. The fall will be a 1 or 2 day virtual event during the first week of November. It will engage a larger audience. It will continue the conversations from the spring. It will create a forum for our stories of landscape stewardship, and it will focus on how we connect and integrate across sectors and social movement networks in our work. Together through the spring and fall forums, we will continue to identify new opportunities for innovation so that we can exceed the pace and scale of our 21st century challenges. Once we realized that we were no longer going to be able to meet in person, we assembled a team of individuals, many of those names you saw on the earlier slides, and we met with other regional and national networks to reconceive our conference. We incubated a new approach and the content through a series of roundtables that have been meeting over the course of the last year. 4 of the roundtables are based on emergent principles of landscape stewardship that we in the network have been defining over time. The first of these, you'll see, is collaborative leadership. And you heard Darcy speak to a collaborative leadership training program. This is something that we see a real need for in the practice of conservation and stewardship. It takes a different kind of leadership, a different type of glue, if you will, to inspire and activate partnerships for impact. The second is around systems thinking and change. In that roundtable, we looked at basically what are those systems that constrain our work, and a lot of this focus has been with our regulatory effectiveness and cutting green tape. But there are others so that we can meet the social and ecological challenges we currently face. The third is grounded in science, science-based solutions. Right now, a lot of the conversation is around biodiversity, but we know there's so much more around the science of stewardship. So we're going to focus on biodiversity, but to continue to grow our conversations and broaden them around science as applied to stewardship. And the last is one that Shalana is a co-lead, and you will be hearing more from Jose Gonzalez too, around justice and diversity, equity and inclusion, which is something that the network has always grappled with, how best to authentically engage in these conversations in a way that we can ensure that we create spaces and work that is inclusive and welcoming. Throughout the next 4 weeks, we will explore each of these principles together and the work of the roundtables through speakers and panels and breakout groups and conversations. So we decided virtual programming, and we recognized that it was important to integrate what I just described. So late last summer, we created a 5th roundtable, Future Horizons. This was made up of 27 participants from around the network, other regional networks, as well as national leaders in this work. Future Horizons participants focused on integrating and synthesizing those principles that I just described, looking for emergent themes so that they could help shape our content for the spring and then ultimately the fall. These participants will reconnect in person in 2022 and reflect upon both the work of the spring and the fall as we advance the outcomes. So today we're excited to host the opening session of this 5-week virtual series, which will run every 3 hours. Well, run not every 3 hours, that'd be a lot to ask of you. Run for 3 hours every Wednesday through May 26th. And as you can see, this is our schedule. Also on May 19th, I want to point your attention to the Network of Landscape Conservation, which is a large national network, is going to have a policy forum, which I hope many of you can join, around science and networks. So as we heard earlier from Shalana, throughout the forum, we will weave the values and themes of justice and diversity, equity, inclusion as through lines for how networks achieve meaningful outcomes in ways that reflect the needs of all landscapes and communities. We hope that each of these 5 sessions will be integrative in content, encourage collective action, and provide the opportunity to celebrate the work accomplished to date with California's growing landscape stewardship community. So now we're excited to roll up our sleeves together. There are approximately 60 of you who've been invited to attend the full event all 5 weeks, with invitations that have also been extended to an additional 20 to 50 people pending the topic of that week. Each week, we'll be asking you and other participants to briefly review materials that will help introduce that week's content. For example, you received the Network Strategic Roadmap last Friday. These emails will be emailed to these content areas. The materials will be emailed to you every Friday before each session and will be posted on our website. That said, I know we are all busy. if you don't have time to review, and I will also offer that I don't always have time to review things, we completely understand. The materials are designed to enrich the participation, not prohibit your participation. More than anything, we want to hear your perspectives. We want to gain from your expertise. We want to listen to your ideas each week, regardless of whether you're able to review the materials prior. Knowing how hard it is to fully engage virtually, plus acknowledging that many of us are missing sharing conversations in person together, we're offering several opportunities for additional engagement and conversation on the forum's themes. We'll be facilitating 3 lunchtime community conversations, which will follow the regular sessions. These are listed in the program, and we'll share reminders throughout our time together. To join, you simply just need to stay on the Zoom call. The first follows today's session. It will be from 12 to 1, and we'll hear more at the end of this session about what the content will include. We realize that some of you are new to the network, and that what we are sharing and the discussions to follow may generate a lot of questions and ideas. That's exciting for us, and we're really inspired to engage with you more. While we will do our best to offer opportunities to address questions during the forum's program, there'll likely be limited time to answer them. So with that in mind, the final lunchtime community conversation on May 26th will be an open Q&A and exchange opportunity for anyone with questions about the network, what you've heard in the forum, ideas for collaborating, and anything that comes to mind. You can also contact Devin Landry, who, just give a big shout out for Devin, who's our networks coordinator, myself, and any of our steering committee members. We're also excited to share an evening social opportunity on May 19th. It will be biodiversity themed, an opportunity to connect more informally and also learn a bit behind the scenes from the authors of Beauty and the Beast, which hopefully many of you received your book and that you've had a chance to peruse by now. I also hear, rumor has it, that we'll be sharing special cocktail recipes that will be thematic with our biodiversity theme with you in advance. We'll be sending out separate Zoom invitations for that event, so please keep your eyes open. Okay, now for some final logistics. We will be meeting by Zoom every week if you hadn't already gathered that. If you have any issues connecting, please contact the tech team. They are amazing. Samir, Michaela, Devin, just again, deep thank you for everything you do. We are recording sessions in part to be able to pull some of the key talks out, but also for us to be able to reflect on as we think about how to move our collective action forward. If you don't wish to be recorded, just please turn off your video. We want to be respectful. The format for these sessions is going to combine live presentations, panel discussions, and interactive working sessions. At any time, please feel free to use the chat, share your comments with presenters, and members of our team will be monitoring the chat. We also recognize that we process information differently, right? And we participate in different ways. So for those of you who are interested, there's another way to interact and share your thoughts with the group. We're holding space on Padlet, which is like a virtual bulletin board, if you will. You can add virtual sticky notes either during the session or any time during the 5 weeks as questions and ideas occur and around the topics that we discuss. We're going to drop a link in the chat so you can see how to connect to that, and we've organized the bulletin board by topics of each week's program. Simply find a topic you want to place a comment, like today's amazing keynote, and click the plus sign on the page and create a note. I'm told it's that easy. And if I can do it, I'm hoping every one of you can. This will be another way you can contribute to the conversation and the outcomes of the forum. We also will have some incredible graduate students joining us. Big shout out to them, who will be taking notes as we prepare the proceedings from the forum. And in the end, we hope that you find these 5 weeks, that they leave you with more hope of what's possible in our field, that it'll leave you with meaningful and productive exchanges around the themes, and that you'll feel more connected to the network and its colleagues around the state. We will be convening again in person in 2022, but we know that this time it is important for us to do this virtually. So how about a little inspiration about what's to come? You're probably tired of hearing my voice. So I would like to welcome some of the roundtable leads. I mentioned these roundtables were absolutely instrumental in helping shape the content for these forums for the weeks ahead. And so in inviting them, we asked them, well, what would you like to share with the participants today about something you're excited about the particular day of the topic that you're helping lead, or maybe something around insights that you've gained? So we want to kick that off. We have next week collaborative leadership. So I'd like to invite Dr. Amy Mickle, who's been working in partnership with Sean Johnson on the Collaborative Leadership Forum.
Thank you, Sharon, and hello, everyone. Great to see you. So just really excited about our session next week. And I just wanted to say some key insights that I've garnered is that discussions about collaborative work and collaborative leadership is really transitioning from the why to the how, and not just how, but how to do it well. And through our roundtable work, we can now see ourselves as participating and contributing to a larger initiative, which we've coined Collaborating Well. Our focus has been designing curricula to help individuals and groups of individuals enhance their ability and capacity to collaborate well, has been the central focus of our collective work. More specifically, we've been focused on how to set those engaged in collaborative work up for success, and especially those working across agencies, partners, and boundaries. We believe that engaging in the process of collaborative leadership, which is where power is shared, requires practice. So our session's next week, and we're really excited to engage with those of you who are on the ground doing this valuable work. We hope to gain greater insight into ways a collaborative leadership program could meet both your personal and collective needs to collaborate well. We are currently in the stages of developing this curricula, and we're extremely eager to share a space with you to engage in discussions around the program overall, the content, and delivery modes. And so we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Amy. Really appreciate that. You know what I love about this field, right? Like, we're talking about some of the biggest challenges we all face, climate change, all these things. And I have to say, the energy of everyone who comes into conversation around this work is just inspiring. And so thank you. Next, we're going to have on May 12th, systems change and systems thinking. I'd like to introduce Kelly X. Nelson, who has been working with Gary Knobloch and Kevin Wright to put this forum together. Welcome, Kelly X.
Hi, thank you. So yes, on May 12th, we're going to be learning a little bit about a systems approach. What is it to change systems? What are systems? What is it to change systems? And what systems do we need to be addressing to accomplish landscape stewardship at the scale that's needed to face the threats, the size, the scope, the pace, the scale of the threats that we're facing today. And a little bit about really what's the difference between a really cool program and having a big picture and actually changing systems instead of doing more of the same, when we're really seeing that winning slowly on climate change is actually losing. So we're going to talk about how do we think differently, what's needed, how do we remove barriers to getting the work done that's ahead, that's critically needed.
Thank you so much. And what I love about what you've been putting together is not only a panel, but also kind of framing it with academics as well as process and practitioners. So I'm excited to be able to join the forum. And then on May 19th, following the national conversation on science and networks, we have our biodiversity forum. Michelle O'Haron's going to join us. She'll introduce her team, who she's been working with, and then give us some inspiration or ideas about what to expect on May 19th. Michelle.
Thank you, Sharon. So the California Landscape Stewardship Network really has not delved deeply into the role of science or how we work with biodiversity specifically as a group. And so trying to pull together this forum session has been an interesting challenge because those are both huge topics and we don't really have a focal point to start off with. So the conversations have been rich and varied and very interesting, and there's a lot to do. So I think, we've decided to focus on biodiversity, as Sharon said, but there's a lot more to this than what we'll be able to cover in that 3-hour session. However, with a focus on biodiversity, I think we really realized that there is a lot of opportunity for talking about how networks, not just the CLSN, but networks at a national, international, and also very much local and regional scales do this kind of work, how that's the same, how it's different, and how that work intersects with other sectors, other priorities, and other values, including the DEI values that are woven through this and all the other sessions. And so it's going to be a very interesting conversation, a lot of room for growth, a lot of room for creativity, and I'm just really excited to see how it all pans out. And we've had a small but intrepid group of people helping me with this, including Christy Brigham, Devin Landry, Kim Tangarjaya, who I don't believe is here today, and a couple other people providing support, including Sharon, of course. Nothing happens without Sharon. And so I just like to thank all of them too for their help on this. It's been a journey, but I think we ended up with a really good program.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think Kim is here, actually.
Oh, is she? Hi, Kim.
So then the next roundtable is our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion roundtable. And you heard from Shalana, and Shalana is the co-lead. She is working with Jose Gonzalez. And Jose wanted to offer some inspiration too about thinking about the work that that roundtable has been putting forward and how it's integrated throughout the entire forum. So Jose.
Thank you, Sharon. And again, gratitude to all of the members in our roundtable. Again, that's just inspiration and leadership incarnate. I want to quickly add that obviously part of the fundamental of this work around quote unquote DEI is the work of othering and belonging, and how do we reduce the impact and harm that comes from how we other, and how do we increase the connection in terms of belonging. And that it isn't rocket science in that sense. And actually, I'm glad it's not rocket science, because it's more exciting when I think about it being ecological relationship. And so I'll close that by being able to say that because we have a lot of the fundamentals of how we know how to recognize belonging in a space, what it feels like and whatnot, it just weaves in this component of being able to expand the space and design differently from what we have inherited that is no longer serves us or has been harmful, all the isms and ideologies such as racism and so forth, and that we have this power within us. So to Shalana's point, I think that there's no reason such a point like this can't be seen forward in terms of the change that we're bringing forth, and that the tools that the roundtable has provided you. So for example, the individual inquiry and an invitation to come to the session right after this, they're part of those practices. So thank you all for engaging.
Thank you, Jose. I'm always inspired by you have such a poetic way of framing things. So deeply grateful for that and your participation. And one thing I just wanted to note, and I think maybe it's obvious to many of you through being a part of the network, but also those of you joining, many people who participate in these leadership roles are volunteering their time or offering their time in a way that is brings such a lift to our work. And I'm deeply grateful for all of the participation, because this truly does take a village, so to speak. The last roundtable is the Future Horizons one, and Devin asked me if I would go ahead and introduce that. So we've had this joke about me talking to myself, but really with the Future Horizons roundtable, it was an opportunity for us to connect with other national leaders and other networks. You know, you heard the Deputy Secretary talk about the Crown of the Continent and the Everglades. This work is happening all around the country. And how do we take our learnings in California and we bring those into conversation with learnings from others from around the country and around the state? And that really helped us create a framework for identifying some bold ideas. And I think we often limit ourselves when we sometimes by just saying a bold idea gives it value and energy. And when you're in a group like Future Horizons and you say it multiple times, it begins to get traction. So you're going to see some of those bold ideas in our forum. And this group was a very integrative group. We talked about the values of this work. We talked about systems change. We talked about the tools we need and the changes we need to make when we talk about working across boundary. So again, much of that work is going to be woven into the rest of the forum as we enjoy our time together in the next 4 weeks. So we have two pieces before we close. One is that I want to introduce Dylan Skybrook. Dylan actually is working with Amy on the Collaborative Leadership Program, and he's going to give us a little bit of a preview to week 2 also. Reflect upon, and he's also going to, through the lens of collaborative leadership and the lens of, he is the manager of the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network, through that lens too, talk about what he's heard today. He's a member of the steering committee. He's a part of the Collaborative Leadership Roundtable. He has expertise in systems thinking, network theory, and leadership, which, like I said about others who you've seen, has been invaluable. And importantly, like Darcy, he brings his dancing shoes to every convening. He brings his creativity and his fun spirit, and we deeply appreciate his leadership. Dylan.
Thanks, Sharon. Like Sharon said, I manage the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network, which is made of 23 organizations that all own or manage or in some way steward land in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I'm also on the steering committee. And I guess the first thing that I want to say is, even though I'm on the steering committee, it's amazing to be here today and see all the things that are going on in the California Landscape Stewardship Network. It just feels very impressive, and it's so nice to have all of you here today and to feel like this work is really poised to move forward, and it's quite powerful. I really loved hearing from Deputy Assistant Secretary Estenaz about her work in Florida, and it's such a useful thing just to hear about work happening outside of California, and to just remind us that this approach is bigger than California, that it's an approach that can be global, and it's a way of understanding the world and understanding how to care for land everywhere. I really liked her line about how in the Everglades they traded in a zoom lens for a wide angle lens, so they could see that big picture. But then also later she talked about, one of the dangers of just seeing through the wide angle lens is that sometimes some people can be left out of that. And that just seems a really valuable thing for us to remember. One of my favorite things that we do in the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network is that we have a series of salons every year. And these are casual events in which the members of the network get together to talk about issues that are important to them. At their most basic, they're opportunities for peer-to-peer sharing, but they're also convivial events. I have them catered with snacks and drinks and so on. And so it's an opportunity for people to build relationships when they might be in different parts of the region and not see each other very often. And one of the things that happens is usually things grow out of the salons that are surprising. And in a way, they kind of encapsulate both the zoom lens and the wide angle lens, in that we focus on certain things to talk about, but as people make connections, something else grows out of it, and we start to see the whole region in a wider way. One thing that came out of it, we had a salon on mountain biking, and out of that grew a trails team. We formed a trails team for the region, and then eventually created a collaborative trails map that is really incredible. And it just wouldn't have happened if we hadn't gotten together via that mountain biking salon. We've done salons on conservation grazing, on prescribed fire. We did one that was Calix's idea on epic fails, about when projects do not go well, when they go badly. That was a pretty good one. It got kind of deep. We got kind of psychological in that one. But it's almost impossible to actually track all the things that have grown out of just this very simple event where we get together and snack and talk about things. But it just shows the power of connecting people up, that we can be more successful when we do that than when we're trying to do things only separately. And that's the point, right, of these kind of networks and of landscape stewardship networks, is to connect people in their shared work and overlapping concerns. And in a landscape stewardship network, of course, that is also just about how land and wildlife are connected. Many of the shared concerns that we have are about those issues that cross property lines and jurisdictions, like fire and climate and invasive species and so on. When Deputy Assistant Secretary Estenaz talked about the various connections in Florida's ecosystem, which I know that all of you can relate to that, it's just such a good example of needing to recognize the connectedness of the land, and then the need to connect the people up in order to steward it. And just those basic ideas of seeing those connections and then making those connections. And the same when Senator McGuire talked about fire and climate change. And in this way, landscape stewardship networks then really make sense. They just make sense because they are responses to the reality of the situation, which is that it's interconnected. In the same way that you need the steering wheel connected to the wheels of a car for it to work, or you need the gas tank connected to the engine for it to work. You know, landscape stewardship networks connect vital elements together that we might often see as separate, but actually, you know, they're more usefully seen as a greater whole. When we connect all those elements, then a new kind of work can happen. And that's really what we're talking about here. And it's not just more work, it's really another kind of work, and I think better, you know, more effective. And it's more effective for the land, but it's more effective for us, right? We get to work together and you know, get the benefit of everybody's opinions. Recognizing that something is not just a separate whatever, but that is connected to other things as part of a greater whole, that's really a skill unto itself, and it's really important. In a car, an engineer might be able to have that view of seeing the parts and how they connect together and be able to design the connections so they work right. But in a network, that's not how it works, right? In a network, we have to build those connections together. We're inside it, we're not outside it. And we have to go through processes of discovery together to figure out how those connections work. And that is not necessarily a skill that everybody learned in college when you were getting your ecology degree or whatever it was, right? That's why we're focusing on developing collaborative leadership skills, which, as Amy said, is the focus of next week's Spring Forum session. As Amy mentioned, the California Landscape Stewardship Network has formed a group called Collaborating Well, and we're developing a collaborative leadership curriculum just for this reason, because everyone has not necessarily been steeped in this skill of seeing connectedness and making connections. And we want to introduce you to some of the dimensions of that curriculum and get your feedback, because it's really meant for people like you. We feel that the more people there are who have developed collaborative leadership skills, the better we can all do this work together, this greater work of helping the wildlife and the plants and even each other thrive. We feel that there's a need to recognize that just participating in this kind of network, not leading it necessarily, not designing it, not facilitating it, but just participating in it actually takes some of these collaborative leadership skills. That's what's going to make it better. There are 4 dimensions to our new curriculum. There's developing an interconnected worldview. That's kind of what I'm talking about right now, right? Recognizing how the world is interconnected. There's enhancing your personal skill set, which is how do you make the connections with the others that you work with. There's facilitating the collaborative process. How do you manage the whole thing? This is the kind of work that Sharon and Devin are doing for this network. And then there's leading from values, which is a big thing, but might include things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we'll talk about a bit next. So we really look forward to introducing this to you and to getting your feedback. So I hope you'll be there next week to hang out with us and learn about this curriculum. One thing that's useful about developing this capacity to recognize interconnectedness, to recognize systems and how they function, is also recognizing when there is an element that's left out, that's disconnected, and then that makes it harder for the whole system to function. And in terms of collaboration, that is often about, you know, thinking about who isn't present, who actually isn't part of the conversation, who maybe hasn't been invited to the table, or who has been made to feel like they don't belong. As Jose was mentioning earlier, that sense of othering or belonging. So here to talk about some of those issues are Chani Navalka, Yakota Poonawalla, and Claire Robinson.
Thanks. Let's see, I think I'll say a little bit of non sequitur, but it's been so wonderful to be part of the roundtable for the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And as Shailana said, you know, we represent a great variety of different organizations and backgrounds. And I think one of the things that is true joy is feeling that you've reached some sort of mutual understanding and trust with other people. And it's the trueness of new connections that we've been talking about a lot this morning in terms of the collaborative leadership and systems change and biodiversity and what's ahead. And I think overcoming othering, which is a big part of or critical factor of our Jedi hopes and dreams, is to do with if we can share our holistic selves together in this next series of weeks and sessions, both our personal path and our professional paths, and create special spaces where these two cross. And we can allow ourselves to feel a little bit vulnerable, maybe confused, forgiven and inspired. And one thing that we shared with you in the packet that was sent out is the map of the mycelium, which is a symbiogenesis example where cooperation between species increases their function and survival, and one organism lives inside another. And we really understand that the role of symbiosis has in major innovations. So cross-cutting thoughts for the way Jedi principles could run through the whole series of sessions is to consider symbiogenesis and symbiosis as a lens of seeing the world. The second thought I'd offer is mistaken identities. We've had a lot of fun in our roundtable discussions for Jedi about, Jose showed a beautiful convex surface, which was a form of navigation. It wasn't a rectangular and flat map. Kisan showed us what could have been seen as a rounded concave object, but it was actually felt, and it's a powerful metonymical weave, kind of a community talisman for a basket made of grass where each strand represents intergenerational knowledge, traditions, social exchange and belonging, wisdom built over time. So I'd kind of invite all of us to see how we're mistaking things in our lives. And I'll use one book that is called De Rerum Natura, because part of what we're doing is creating a reference list of books, critical mass of books and inspirations that we can all share together. And this was characterized or marginalized as a poem, but I really think it was a treatise on physics, a physics that's based on flow and water as opposed to fire and heavy objects dropping from the earth. So if that poem in 99 BC had been considered the treatise on physics, we might be in a whole different world today. So it'd be fun to look for mistaken identities in your life, seeing a person, place, reference slightly differently and unlocking new worlds. Something very dear to my heart is I was conversing yesterday with my 15-year-old teen, and she was lamenting how hard it is to work with people in a group setting in high school. And she is disabled, and she often feels isolated in an ableist world. So I spend a lot of time trying to understand the world through her eyes. And I said, you know, Julia, working with people who are the same and different, who you respect and trust and who you enjoy and who you feel accept you for who are as passionate and hardworking as you are. I really, truly think that this is the definition of luxury. And she said, Mom, I think you're right. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Claire. And thank you, everyone. What an amazing, 2 hours we have just spent together, and heartfelt, impassioned, thought-provoking, connecting, all those things that really inspire and I think help us do the work we do as a network. A colleague of mine asked me the other day, said, you're an ecologist by training, right? Like, how did you get into this network stuff? And I kind of smiled because I think when you step back and you look at ecology, right, it's about systems, it's about processes, it's about interconnectivity, it's about interconnectedness. Well, sorry about that. And that's what networks are about, and so you can apply those same principles as an ecologist taking care and stewarding lands as to thinking about networks. So I just feel that when that light switch went on for me, maybe 10 years ago, it became much more natural to doing this type of work.